Welcome everybody, it's Rob from Sage Tower Fables, and we're here with the very first official video for this specific channel. And this one is going to be a popular book, and very popular. If you are a fantasy book reader, you probably know what book this is. You've at least heard about it. You've probably read it, let's be honest. If not, it's definitely on your to-read list. And it is, of course, Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series, starting with Mistborn 1, The Final Empire. Now, this is the book that I own. There's multiple versions of the book you can find in various stores, different, bigger ones, different covers, and all that stuff. This is the one I happen to have when I bought my series. And it's interesting to note about this one is, the longest time I didn't realize that I think it's called Mistborn: The Final Empire, but most books just list it as Mistborn, so just keep that in mind. And this is an iconic series. Like I said, if you are a fantasy reader, if you are someone you've probably heard of Brandon Sanderson. He's written the Mistborn series. He also has written more famously as well, probably the Stormlight Archive, which is kind of like the big culmination of works. And that's his big series beyond this one as well. A few other books and stuff he's kind of read offshoots as well as future expansions to the Cosmere and to the Mistborn universe as well. So lots to go on. The way we're going to do this video is we're going to talk a bit about the book, talk a bit about non-spoiler stuff for a bit. I will go into spoiler talks halfway somewhere through the video. For some stuff, I will talk about those will be like the plot point spoilers and the major plot points. And then at the end of the video, we'll kind of go and do my final thoughts and my overall review for this book. Now again, the non-spoiler part will have the basic stuff. So like, I won't go into the spoiler stuff, but I will at least, I'll mention character names that you see. I'll mention stuff that you may get from reading the back of the book kind of stuff, or the basics, the system and the world kind of stuff. Nothing too spoilerish, but just the basic genetics of it. So, without further ado, let's hop on into the journey and start with the non-spoiler discussion about this book. Alright. So here we are, non-spoiler discussion about this book. What can we say? First thing, this is an amazing book. This, in essence, it's a heist story for the most part of it, as you kind of see this ragtag group of characters coming together to essentially, try and steal stuff or overthrow the Empire. Now, what makes it interesting is every character is quite unique, interesting. They'll have their own unique personalities, their own motives and drives. You do follow a few characters off from the beginning. You have Vin, a kind of young girl who has strange powers that kind of gets helped develop by this older male mentor who's a very famous type individual, kind of like named Kelsia. And the dynamic between both of them, as well as just the dynamic of Kelsia in general, gives you great vibes between them. One of the main reasons I wanted to read this series is one of my first series I chose to read when I got into fantasy reading, especially as a tabletop kind of dungeon master type person. I like to read them for world building, curious ideas about magic systems and the like. One thing you'll probably hear a lot of is the fact that the magic systems in Mistborn are really good. There's no way else to put them. The idea of allomancy that they use in this book is a unique way to look at magic. And I'll go into the minor details about it. I won't go into too many for these. Basically, the body can burn certain metals, and different metals give you different powers. And most people can only burn, 1-2 types of metals. But you have a Mistborn who can burn all the metals in their body, giving them access to all the skills in the gambit. As well as each metal has kind of like a component like go with it. So, and in case you're wondering what these are, it thankfully I'll pull up for you guys here, and you can kind of see how like each symbols are like broken up into like wedges. So those are kind of the ones that work together. You can kind of and you have ink, steel, tin, pewter, zinc, brass, copper, and bronze. And that's actually kind of unique concept in that it's not like traditional spell casting, not like playing up using magic. It's this kind of weird way that metal becomes a benefit, but also becomes a danger as well. Because there's some people who can manipulate metals. So like they can throw metal, they can pull metal. So wearing metal pieces on your body can actually hinder you. Now, there is some like limitations to this, where if the metal's inside you, or if it's like piercing through your body, so it's technically inside you, a person can't pull it on you. So then that would stop people from like being able to pull metal that's inside your stomach out, kind of deal. Now, this gives it a unique ability. It's just, I haven't seen any system like this prior to it. You know, normally you see this traditional either magic systems, like kind of like the fantasy systems, like Lord of the Rings, or even like Game of Thrones, even D&D. It's kind of like just traditional spell casting, Vancian magic, those kind of stuff. And even some other stuff like people have, you know, power from the gods or that kind of, you know, magical blood. This one, being able to have metal, and then essentially you could just like pop some metal in your mouth, eat it, and you could burn it to gain these powers. Now, the reason why I'm so hyped about this is because it kind of shows you how when you make this crew, each person has a specific role depending on the kind of metal they can burn, helping you kind of shape your team all together. So each person has a different aspect, or they can do a different thing. There is talks about another element of metal out there, a rare one that only that they say only Mistborn people can burn, and it's this kind of special one that essentially lets you kind of like see the future and do all sorts of like gives you foresight. Basically, you can predict everything, and pretty much makes you invincible for a short period because you can see anything that's coming. It's this kind of rare product that they kind of mine in the pits of Hashan, and they just do all this stuff. So it gives you that kind of like little kind of like nugget, which will carry on as the story develops between the 3 books. Now, what I also like about this is, and this is part I won't go into too much, is Sanderson does really good in giving you twists and turns. And about halfway through the book, there's a pretty good twist that kind of changes how you expect the book to go, and a few other changes that really make you kind of throw off what you expect is going to happen in the book. And I like that. It actually made you want to like keep going to see what the change was and how the story actually progressed. And I wasn't too upset over. I actually watched the video of Sanderson doing his he did a writing class at, I forget what university it was. He mentions how he kind of, when he outlined the book, how he kind of did that, kind of like you're going this way, and then he kind of like changes the plans of how the book's gonna go halfway through. And it's a really interesting video to watch. What is also interesting about this book, particularly the first one, is the world building isn't that rough in this one. There are some fantasy books and some fantasy series where you take a book and like half of the book, like the first third of the book, maybe, is like world building and not much really happens. And then it gets good. There are some books like that. Some books are worth that like commitment before it hits the big juicy bits. This one doesn't have that issue. It has a good story throughout the entire series. I will say in most of Sanderson's books in this series, you do kind of go into this where it's really good, really good, really good, and you get to the last like third, last quarter of the book, and that's when everything just goes insane. And that's usually when like there's action scenes, there's like shocking reveals, twists, big climactic endings, all sorts of stuff happening, and it gets wild. Speaking of all that, the action scenes are actually pretty well done. They're actually pretty well written, to where they're not too basic and they're not too chaotic. What I mean by this is there are sometimes you could have fighting scenes when you have to almost like reread it a few times to kind of like visually picture where everybody is and what everyone's doing. This one you don't have to do that really, and it's not too basic where they're boring and it's kind of like, okay, he swings a sword. It's nothing like that. It's a little bit more exciting. Definitely a really good, exciting read, and definitely a book that I recommend. Now we're gonna get into the spoilery, juicy topics. So if you have not read this book, skip over to the end. I'll give my review about the book. If you have, let's dive into the real nitty-gritty about this book. Alright, spoiler time. So where do we begin with the spoilers for the Mistborn? There are probably a few major points to obviously bring up. Spoilers for this book. We'll start with the big one, obviously, which would be Kelsia's death. It's hard to me. I say probably unexpected when I first read it. In retrospect, I can kind of see the purpose of it. It's that Obi-Wan to Luke kind of New Hope vibe. That seeing the Master defeated, kind of pass the mantle over to Finn. And Finn being your main character, your main heroine for the series. I wasn't upset about it. Like, there are some times where I can be a bit upset about the main character, especially a cool main character dying, but he went out like a boss. Like, you could see a cool anime type like final boss fight with him against the Steel Inquisitors, and it was an epic scene. Like, he didn't go down like a chump. Let's put it that way. He went strong. It was so shocking, but I'm definitely okay with the fact that that happened. The other part, of course, I mentioned a bit in the non-spoiler section, was obviously the twist, and about halfway through the book, the army that Kelsia and they all are raising gets annihilated halfway through the book. They just get attacked, invaded. Thousands of soldiers are killed in the battle. It's an interesting twist because you don't expect that. You don't see many like heist type books, the kind of stories where they suffer that major of a setback. Usually it might be a minor setback, or usually it might be kind of like they have this plan, but then the kind of parameters of the plan changes. This one was kind of like, no, we just lost everything, so now we got to completely change what we're going to do. We're going to strike 4-6 this and send in people, do this kind of a targeted strike against the Lord Ruler, and have the army kind of as support backup. So this kind of big change is unexpected, but it really hits you when you read it and you go, wait, what? And then because I'm pretty sure it ends one of the acts or parts, as they and you read it and you go, wait, what just happened? And then now you obviously want to read on to see what the continuation of it. So that was quite interesting, I have to say. Now, the end part with the Lord Ruler and the talks with Sazed. I didn't mention Sazed earlier. I probably should have mentioned, but I didn't want to spoil too much about Sazed and Eland for the non-spoiler people. Obviously, as prominent characters in the book. But the idea that it introduces, not only does it introduce characters, it introduces the Lord Ruler's secret, but which is kind of this very popular, I feel like, trope. You have these like big, almost like godlike rulers of cities, empires, who have a dark secret behind them all the time. That kind of, Wizard of Oz type trope of this all-powerful being, but actually has a secret that he's not that crazy. Like, you expect Lord Rule to be this amazing person, but he just so happens that he can use, allomancy and ferromancy kind of powers. So being able to use ferromancy abilities is a unique twist to him. At the beginning, when we first see ferromancy, I think we see a bit of it briefly with Sazed throughout the book. And ferromancy actually becomes a pretty cool thing, I feel like. And it's this interesting complement to allomancy, where as opposed to the metal being inside your body, it's the metal you wear on your body, and you kind of have to invest into it to get the payback later on. It's a lot more delayed gratification as opposed to that instant hit from allomancy, where it's like it's in your body, let's go. It's that complement between the two of them that's really nice to see. And again, I can't hype about this system too much. It's a really cool system. I love it a lot. And Vin is amazing. At the beginning, she probably takes a little bit to get used to, in my opinion. Like, she's kind of that like street ruffian type kid, but eventually she kind of really settles into her own, especially after Kelsia's death. That really kind of sets her up to be this center stage character. If there are any spoilers and stuff that you guys think, I would say post them in the comments, but we don't want to post spoilers in the comments. We want to be good readers and not ruin books for people who may want to read them, no matter how long the books may have been published for. So don't post spoilers in the comments, please. Let's post praise and revere for Sanderson and his books and all of that sort. Now, with that, let's head to the final review. I'm gonna give the final thoughts and stuff about this book. Alright guys, final thoughts time. We've made it past the spoilers, we've talked a bit about some of the big stuff in there. I've tried to keep this video specifically contained to this book only. What I mean by this is, even with the spoilers, I specifically kept them to just this book. Even if something in this book may be an important plot point for the future books in the series, I don't want to ruin that. Because maybe you read this book, you haven't gotten around to reading, Well of Ascension or Hero of Ages yet, and you kind of want to check out the thoughts and stuff. So keep that in mind for those of you who are already at the keyboard. Well, this character does this, blah 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 blah. I know, but not everybody knows. So calm down. But while you are in the comments, be sure to hit that subscribe button for this brand new channel that's talking about fantasy books. Every follow helps, every comment helps, so be sure to let your thoughts out. Of course, non-spoiler thoughts. We do not want people talking about spoilers, so help the channel out greatly. Now, final thoughts. If you are a fantasy book reader, definitely recommend this book. In my opinion, 5 out of 5 stars. This is one of the best books to read. If you are a good like invested reader, I would definitely put it on your list. Or you've probably read it already if you have not. Now, I will say this. If you are a new reader, I don't mean someone who's like brand new to reading, but someone who wants to get into fantasy reading, and you struggle with like focusing, time, that kind of stuff. I don't know if I would start with this book as your first foray into fantasy reading. The reason being, this book, as you can kind of see, even in its small form, has over 600 pages. That may be daunting to some of you. 600 pages, and in this case, in this version at least, small text. That may be a lot for your first book. You don't want to burn yourself out, and then especially if it takes you too long, you may kind of struggle. Start with a smaller book, get into it a bit, get hooked, then go to the big books. Sanderson doesn't hold back. all his books are pretty massive for the most part. I feel like all the books in Mistborn and Stormlight Archive are chunky books. Stormlight Archive it's a beast of its own. If you ever walk by the fantasy section and you see the books that are like this big, it's probably Oathbringer, let's be honest. That's the one kind of knock I would give to this book, is you definitely have to worry about length if you're a new reader to it. I would be cautious about that. However, it's a great book, great series. If you get this book and you read it and you get invested to it, you're gonna read the next ones and they get relatively better. I would say I'll go into much discussion for the other ones, but it gets crazier and crazier as the books progress to this epic, I think, series conclusion that really knocks your socks off. My review, again, for this book is 5 out of 5 stars. What's your thoughts about the book? Let me know your rating and your review in the comments down below, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this very first book review and book talk on Sage Tower Fables. Thank you guys.